I have worked security on and off for several years to supplement my income, so I've heard quite a few creepy stories from coworkers. Probably, the most legitimately scary story I've heard was from a guard that was working in a closed-down arena. The building is more than 100 years old, but hasn't been used since the early 2000s. The city is keeping up with basic maintenance as it waits for a buyer. There's usually one guard assigned to the building. It's a 6,000-seat arena with a huge basement and 2 additional floors that have lots of old office spaces, dressing rooms, and a separate, smaller community theater type of stage that's upstairs. The usual guard is doing his round through the building. The building itself is very interesting, as it is largely unchanged since the heydays of the 70s and 80s. The upper floors are largely dark and are pretty creepy. Anyway, the guard is doing his normal rounds but feels unnaturally creeped out. It is his normal post, but something feels different today. He's feeling jumpy, but shakes it off and continues. He's a very diligent guy, so he walks every floor of the building. He is in the very top of the catwalk system, above the main arena where the old spot lighting equipment was. It is a narrow, wooden catwalk system. Suddenly, he hears a loud creak behind him, like someone is walking. He spins around and sees a guy standing there. The guy's frozen, mid-stride, like he's been tiptoeing up behind him. The guy has an unsettling, mischievous-looking smile on his face, like he's been caught with his hand in a cookie jar. The dude has a big steel pipe in his hand instead of a cookie though. The guard pulls his gun, and the guy takes off running in the opposite direction and disappears into the labyrinth of the building. The cops arrive and sweep the building with a K9, but doesn't find him. They do find that he's been playing in the dust that's on the top of the old concession counters. He had written a bunch of bizarre, helter-skelter type unsettling rhymes, and drew a bunch of stick figures hanging from nooses. The speculation is he was some crazy homeless guy that had been hiding in the building a few days, and had made a game of following the guards without them knowing it. I saw the writing, still on the counters the last time I was there. My grandfather-in-law worked for a private security company as an armed guard for a while, in the 80s. It was a smaller company that mostly loaned out guards for short-term work. Things like guarding construction sites, conventions, that kind of work. Him and one other guard from the company were posted at a department store mini mall that had recently had someone drive a freaking car through one of the atriums, Blue Brothers style. The guards were to patrol the mall and the outside grounds because with the atrium destroyed, they had no real way to lock up the building, on account of the huge hole in it. They had put some boards and such, but it wouldn't have taken much at all to move them and get inside. The mall had a small bank in it, as well as a pharmacy and electronics store. The owners were terrified someone was going to use the damage as an excuse to break in. So they contracted armed guards to patrol it, and had their normal night watchman, who was apparently a real old-timer, just kind of hang out and watch the cameras instead of doing rounds. Easy work, right? Well, the mall closes, and my grandpa and his partner show up. They do a walk of the mall, test all the doors they can, make sure what alarms that exist are armed, all the standard stuff. They radio into the watchman that they are going to do a once around the outside of the mall to test the doors from the outside and to check for anything odd. The watchman radios back on OK, and they head out, each going different directions, and locking the door behind them. My grandpa is walking along the back of the mall testing service doors and such, when his partner yells at him over the radio. The barrier is shredded. There's a huge hole. Get here fast. My grandpa takes off in a dead sprint. As he runs, he radios the watchman asking him what's going on. He gets no reply. He radios him again, yelling, trying to get him to respond. Silence. He arrives at the barrier with the other guard, and sure enough, there's a hole just big enough for a person to crawl through that's been shredded out of the plywood. It looks like someone dug through it with something sharp. My grandpa crouches down and shines his light through the hole, but again, this is the 80s, and incandescent flashlights don't exactly cut through the dark like the flashlights we have today, so he can't see anything weird inside. He turns to his partner and says they need to call the police, but this being the 80s, cell phones aren't super common yet, so if they're going to do it, they need to get inside the mall and find a phone. They try radioing the watchman again, and still no reply. They get their guns out and squeeze through the hole and start advancing towards the security office. Most of the stores have shutters that are down, so it's a pretty straight shot. As they make their way there, they hear an earth-shakingly loud scream. He said it sounded like a person with a chest the size of a car was just screaming as loudly and as savagely as they could. They both turned towards where the sound came from, which is a grocery store. It is the only store inside the mall that doesn't have a shutter, on account of how large it is. They start moving that way because they still can't reach the watchman and are worried whatever screamed may have him. As they get closer, they hear something tearing the place up, just raising hell in the store. They shout that they are security and that they are armed and to come out with their hands up. No sooner than they had yelled, a huge mountain lion threw itself around the corner. Both him and his partner unloaded on the thing, just completely dumped their guns into it. My grandpa said that his partner was so terrified that he almost passed out. The mountain lion was clearly not well, as his face was all shredded and he had a bunch of infected wounds all over it. They guessed that it was probably rabid, so they stayed well back from it. As soon as the commotion was over, the watchman came on the radio in a panic, asking what was happening. The old-timer had fallen asleep at the cameras and missed everything. My grandpa said that was the only time in his entire time as a guard that he ever had to even unholster his sidearm, much less fire it. Are you alone? Check your window and hit that like button. About 15 years ago, I was a guard at a pastry manufacturing plant. At night, it was a cold, creepy place, filled with weird machinery, and is very much in a really bad part of town. There was a catwalk above some of the machines that led to offices, with a long metal staircase. Around the beginning of the staircase was a metal cage with a gate I had the key to. Nobody else was there. Up on the catwalk there were hooks with lab coats, 3 coats with 5 hooks. All were hung on the side where the catwalk met the stairs, so the far 2 hooks were empty. After I made my round this night, I came back and noticed 1 coat moved from the middle hook to the far hook. I unlocked the gate, closed it, and locked it behind me to check the offices. This was about 8 p.m., and the last of the employees had left, but I figured maybe one returned. The catwalk was empty, and so were the offices. There was no other way down, so now I'm a little freaked out, but I figure it's just my mind. So I go back down, lock the gate, and head to the lounge area. The next round is done and the coats are moved, each hanging on an alternating hook. Now I am a little pissed, thinking someone is definitely messing with me. I go back up the catwalk. Empty. I check the offices. Empty. I lock the gate and check the back and front doors. They are all locked shut. The alarm is on. I go back to the lounge and lock myself in there. Fuck whatever was going on. I checked the monitors we had. Nothing. Every time I did a round, the codes changed. I actually stopped doing rounds, and figured if they want to fire me, I don't care. I got a new assignment after that, and never went back. I asked other guards who had that assignment, and was told that weird things did indeed happen there with no explanation. In 2019, I worked for 2 different private security companies, both of them completely unarmed. I was new to the field, so I wasn't aware that I was allowed to bring my own non-lethal weapons to help defend myself. No one ever mentioned it to me, but it was what it was. Some location context. I lived in Orange County, CA, and worked there and LA before getting out of private security. Locations are South Anaheim and Southeast LA. These places are not places you'd want to venture after dark as a security officer. You'll see why. This is broken up by the company I worked for. First company. I get to this location in South Anaheim at 10 p.m. and clock in. This post is a basic patrol type thing. You patrol every hour and use the work phone to scan different points to prove you did it. Log observations and things you did. The first 4 hours go by with nothing going on other than a few homeless, and we're green across the board. We have to call police if we see anything illegal, and document anything out of the ordinary. Well, except in South Anaheim, technically anything could be reported. 2:30 a.m. rolls around, and I observe 2 individuals, one on a bike and another on foot. They both pop behind the stores at the West End Strip Mall, so I call the police and explain the situation. I call my soup like I'm supposed to, who of course isn't answering, because he works mornings. Of course he does. The police arrive. I make contact with them and point where they went. They drive over to the location and start looking around. Then they come back and say that they must have left and tell me to call them if they come back. And then they leave. 3 a.m. rolls around and I start my scan point crawl. I see these same 2 people from across the way. The guy on the bike yells something at me and he started paddling hard in my direction. I pivot where I stand and book into my guard shack. It was an abandoned restaurant, and I lock the door. I dive behind the counter in the back, and this time I call 911. Police were apparently right around the corner and came speeding into the parking lot. They tackled the guy on the bike and the other boats. The second person hadn't moved from the original spot. The police found a 9mm fully loaded, with 2 extra mags, 3 OZ of meth, and several knives. The thought of this dude reaching me still scares the absolute shit out of me, because he most likely would have killed me just for snitching. The cops basically tell me that the person has been in and out of jail since they were 13 for drugs and gang activity. Second employer. I was chilling at an aviation manufacturer post, which was my main one. This place was always quiet, but this was around the time the OC decided to try and push the homeless out and away from their cities. I forget why it happened, but it doesn't matter. It is about 3 a.m. and I had just finished a game of CSGO with a buddy, and I had to hit my points for the hour. I do so, and nothing is out of place, so I come back to the shack. I set up for another game, and the video PA we have rigged to the gate suddenly lights up. I am caught off guard because no one is there until about 5 a.m. I look on the camera and I see this bald dude who is absolutely shredded. For additional context, I am 5'5" and I was about 160 at the time. This dude was easily pushing 6 feet and more than 200 pounds. If this dude got in, he'd absolutely fuck me all the way up without trying. He's banging on the gate and screaming about how the government was trying to steal his thoughts, or something like that. I called the police department and kept watching this guy rant, rave, and be an absolute maniac. I'm pretty sure he had no idea if I was even in the shack or not, and he's high as a kite on meth or something. I step outside while I'm still on the phone with the police to see if they can hear him. Now, this post has the plastic privacy things for chain link fences. You know the ones I'm talking about. He catches a glimpse of me through one of the privacy things and really freaks the fuck out. This absolutely unit of a man jumps up and starts scaling this fence. I should mention that not only did this post have a chain link fence with the vinyl privacy blinds, but also a metal one behind it that has the outward facing spikes at the top. This guy basically pushes through both of security features at the top of both fences and lands on my side. Now this dude is high on meth, mad as fuck, and covered in blood. Mind you, I'm still on the phone with the police. They can hear this guy and are listening to me yell at the top of my lungs what this guy just did. I bolt into my shack, lock the door, pin the chair under the handle, without realizing that this dude has a whole ass window to break through to get to me, which is exactly what he did. Homie punches the glass out of one of the panes, grabs me, and pulls me through the window on the ground in front of my shack. I'm now pinned by this guy. The police arrive and ram the gate open with their cruiser. Within seconds, they pull him off of me and wrestle with him for a couple of minutes. It took 2 tasers to subdue him and get him into the back of the car. The best part is what my management said to me when I called them after this all concluded. "Are you okay? Do you need to go to the hospital?" "No?" "Fantastic. You can finish your shift off and we'll see you tomorrow for your next shift." I quit the next day.